We continue the story of John Futch and his fellow soldiers who deserted their camps near Montpelier, Virginia, with, of course, the intent of getting back to North Carolina. They left again on August the 20th. They made their way due south. They got to the James River, and on August 25th, they ran into a Confederate patrol, happened to be from North Carolina, demanded their surrender. The men refused. A gun battle erupted, and the officer of the arresting party was shot and killed instantly. Futch and his comrades, they surrendered. They were sent to Richmond, Virginia, a place called Castle Thunder. A trial took place. We don't have the trial transcripts, and we no longer have the words of John Futch. And for the remaining weeks of his life, we learn of his story through the eyes of the men who he considered to be his oppressors. And that would be, of course, the Confederate Army. The Confederate Army that rendered a verdict of death before a firing squad. That took place in early September, took place near Montpelier. The entire division, Johnson's division, the very men who fought right here around me on July the 2nd, they were formed up in a hollow square. And there were 10 stakes that Futch and his comrades were tied to, each soldier facing an execution squad of 10 soldiers. And when the command was given to fire and the volleys were unleashed and the smoke cleared, two men were still living. Reserve companies were brought up and fired, of course, to finish the job, but that was not the end of this ritual. For those soldiers from Johnson's division, they were forced to march by the corpses of Futch and his fellow deserters to impress upon them the lethal consequences of leaving the army in Northern Virginia. The press used this incident to try to build Confederate morale, to remind and to warn Southerners of what would happen to deserters, and to, in fact, put the blame, the onus of this act, not necessarily on the men themselves who left, but on their families, especially their wives. And in these accounts, there is no mention of the names of these men. You'll not read John Futch's name in the Richmond paper, but instead he will be referred to as a common criminal. And so, of course, to understand this story, to appreciate it in all of its fullness, we have the good fortune to have his words, to have his voice, to know that John Futch, that he deserted because of what he had felt and what he had experienced right here at Gettysburg. And that he had left his army because he had a wife and a child at home who was on the brink of impoverishment. And that he, in fact, had not been paid by the Confederate Army. And that he, in fact, up to that point, had done his duty. But in all those Confederate papers, there is no mention of any of that context. There is no sense of what happened here on July the 2nd as the impetus as to why John Futch ultimately decided to risk it all and desert the Confederate cause.